Hey everybody, this is Tom with VermiBag. I'm going to do a quick feeding on one of the wedges. I'm going to do all three of them, but I'll just show you how I do a pretty heavy feeding and what I'm feeding them. And normally, like I said, when I feed them this amount, I can go at least 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks if I get busy. You know, it'll keep them fat and happy for that whole time. And this is kind of the base feeding. And then as I get additional kitchen scraps and stuff like that, I just throw it into the individual bins as I get it. So what it starts with is I get some horse manure from somebody over here, and they have it already composted and it's mixed with sawdust. So this is what that looks like. So this is definitely not hot anymore, and there's a lot of sawdust mixed in it. So it makes a really good base. Problem is when they scoop it up, I get a lot of rocks in it because they're pulling it out of an area that's kind of rocky. So I normally take that and throw it through, you know, a 1/4 inch screen or a 1/2 inch screen if I can come up with this. So this is just a really fine sifted manure. And then I'm still getting coffee grounds from a couple espresso places. And so what I do is I normally mix up a huge bin like this. It's about 50% coffee grounds and 50% peat moss, and then as much shredded paper as I find or as I come up with. I just keep throwing shredded paper in there. And so what I'm going to do is mix this shredded paper and coffee grounds and peat moss with all this, about 50-50 with the horse manure. And that makes a really good base to feed them. And I'll put in, you know, each one of those systems, I'll put in about 5 gallons. You know, lay down on the active surface of that where, you know, they're actually feeding on the wedge. I'll add about, you know, 2-inch layer at least, somewhere around there, and just even it all up and, you know, make my wedge nice and even and do it to each one of them. So I'll go in and we'll take a look at I'm going to do the red wigglers today on the video and show you how I, you know, give them what it looks like right now and after I give them a, you know, 5-gallon feeding. Okay, so it's about 39 degrees today. I mean, it's not terribly cold and stuff, but it's definitely cool in this shed. So again, those are the 3 wedge systems that I'm running. And the one that has the red wigglers in it is this one here. Like I said, this one's Indian Blues, red wigglers, and then a mixture of both. And then the little mammoth over there that I'm running has Euros in it. So this is the one I'm going to go ahead and I'll give it probably about 5 gallons. We'll take a look at it and see what the worms look like right now. I gave them a little bit of kitchen scraps and stuff a few days ago, so we'll see how they're doing with that. Now on the last video too, I also, you know, mentioned, but I didn't really show it. If you make a stand like this, it's really simple to just take a board and put a couple guides on it like that. And it sits right here on top of this, and it gives you a perfect stand. You know, when you're doing maintenance, you can just slide this thing however you want along it. And it's just great because when you're over here working on it, you know, you can settle your food or whatever you want on there, your buckets, and it gives you a place to, when you're pulling off pads or your covers, you can set them on there. Super simple to make. You just got to adjust it so the guides, you know, are just rub on the side of the stand. You can see here, because each one of these is actually slightly different. So you kind of got to make it for your specific stand based on the width of this thing. So just stick the board up there and put those guides in and see where they need to go. But it's definitely worth making them. Okay, so this is the red wiggler bin, or wedge. So you can pull off the insulating pillows. Pull off some of these layers of cordura. So like I said, the area that the pad sits is definitely drier, but if you just go down about 2 inches, then it starts getting pretty moist. So it's pretty easy just to add a little bit of moisture to this area. And I'll do that before I feed it. I want all this paper to be wet and the stuff here to be moist as well. And then I'll add the feeding on top of it. And down below is where all the you know, scraps and stuff I put in. You can see with the bananas, they're definitely going to town with that. It's just under the heating area. So, and for the red wigglers, they're pretty tough. They don't mind cooler temperatures. But this thing is absolutely packed with worms. They're really liking it. You know, I got a lot of cardboard and mixed stuff. I just throw all the junk on this end of the bin. I have a grow pot in here just for insulation. I just got it sitting in there because this end of the bin it's never been used yet. I haven't been running it a year and I've never made it yet from that end all the way to the other end. So, and the wedge is kind of lessened on its angle. So I think optimum is to keep it up high like this here, come across and go pretty steep, and then work your way across. But so as this gets composted and finished castings, I'll probably pull it back and see if I can kind of increase the slope of this wedge. But actually the bottom here really isn't. It's just paper that I had thrown in here. I mean, it's slowly starting to decompose and the worms are moving into it. So it's actually kind of making, this used to be the end of the wedge. But with all that paper and stuff, it kind of just flattened it out and, you know, they're working. And I guess it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. This works. So I'm going to go ahead and wet down this area right here. And then we'll go get some of that bedding and food, horse manure mix, and we'll layer that on there. So when I water this down, I don't use a little spray. I use a garden hose that, you know, has a nice little fan spray on it. It's kind of a waste of time to use some piddly little thing that doesn't put out any water at all. Again, you don't want to drown it completely, but I mean, there's a lot of mass there, so it can absorb a lot of moisture. And I'm wetting down the castings as well, just a little bit, the finished castings, just to make sure that I keep those things moist. And that's about it. So, pretty good dosing of water. I mean, don't be afraid to give it a fair amount. I mean, you can reach down in there and tell that it's not soaking wet down there. And again, I have a bunch of paper here on the end that, you know, absorbs anything, that excess that goes in. Oh, and also, in order for that to work well, what I did is I made sure that that end of the bag is just slightly higher than this end of the bag. So any moisture, if you're feeding it too much and it's too wet, it would hit the bottom of that and it would tend to, you know, drain down to this end here. Real simple to do. You can just put make the bag, the stand itself even, but then just, you know, roll it up on a half-inch block or something on the one end, just to make one end slightly higher. So I'll go ahead and get the 5 gallons of... Okay, so I have basically a mortar tray full of bedding and horse manure and stuff. And the nice thing about this is you really can't overfeed them with a bedding. You can put as much bedding in there as you want, and that's what this really is. It's nothing that's super high in nitrogen that's going to start, you know, decomposing or getting sour and rotting and going anaerobic and stuff. With that well composted manure and then the paper, the sawdust, and coffee grounds. Now the coffee grounds are a little bit hot still slightly, but I got them mixed in with a lot of material, so I think the worst they'll do is heat up just a tiny little bit and give it warm, and that's good right now because we're in the middle of the winter, so a little bit of heat in the bin from the coffee grounds is actually a good thing. Just don't go really heavy, you know, thick with coffee. You don't want it more than about 25% of your mix. And the other thing that's nice is having that sliding tray, or, you know, that's on top of it. So it's over here on this side right here, and I have that bin sitting there with all the compost. So all I'm going to do again is just layer about 2 inches or so all along the feeding face of this thing. Now as I get more banana peels and, you know, kitchen scraps and stuff like that, again, I always freeze them. It seems like it just avoids a lot of, you know, larvae and stuff that can be on your vegetables and stuff. So to me it's well worth taking the extra effort and freezing these things before I put them in there. And also the worms will definitely work the material a lot faster if they're frozen. So that's, yeah, you know, 2 to 3 inch layer, I suppose. Looks nice and neat now. I'm going to give them a slight little bit of treat. I have some ground up chicken scratch and birdseed, which makes a really good worm chow. So I'm going to add just a tiny little bit, a couple little, just to get them to the surface here, for they'll really start working this surface. Don't want to give too much of this either, because there's a lot of worms in here, so they'll take care of this stuff really quickly. But if you don't have a lot of worms and you give them too much of this, it'll definitely ferment and get pretty nasty. So be very cautious on how much worm chow you put in your systems. So now I'm going to go ahead and wet down that bedding that I put in and get this worm chow and stuff to kind of sink down into that bedding. It was moist, but it wasn't really that wet, so a little bit extra moisture will actually do it good. Not going to go crazy, just enough to kind of get the worm chow to kind of soften up a little bit and kind of work down into that bedding. About like that. Again, I lay down my layer from my heating pad. So I put that, I normally run the heating pad sideways because it fits pretty good in here. And I'll go ahead and put my cold press, hot cold packs over the top. These work really well because they really hold the heat in. And again, I'm going to cover it up again. And you can use whatever, you know, I happen to be using covers. This was a cover for an old tote, and you can use whatever you want. I wouldn't use bubble wrap, plastic against that heater. I would use some type of fabric or something that's somewhat waterproof and, you know, resistant to the heat. You know, it's going to melt. And this is the cover. I don't have this listed yet, but I have a cover, a Cordura cover that fits these wedges all the way from one end to the other, and it's real nice. It really is. It's a lot of material, unfortunately. It's a big sheet of material, but it works really well. Then I'll go ahead and add the rest of these pillows on to keep that heat in. One little worm. That's it. I'll come in here in a couple of weeks and we'll take a peek at this, and we'll see how it's coming along. But I'm going to go ahead and do all the other 2 wedges here, and so that's it for today, folks. Like I said before, these wedge systems are actually really simple to use. They're super productive, and you can see how much material you can actually put in these things and feed them. I do want to emphasize again, you know, I'm putting a huge amount of food in there, you know, it was probably about 6 gallons because it was a full mortar tray. And but you don't have to worry about that, you know, going bad and the worms going anaerobic and killing your worms, because it's more of a bedding. Everything that's in there is part of that bedding that I always make, but the bedding is also food. So if you give them that 2 or 3 inches of bedding food, then you can come along and supplement that as you come along out of the kitchen. You have a bunch of frozen celery. Like I had a whole head of celery that I had thrown in this one a couple weeks ago. I just threw it in the freezer. After I got out of the freezer, I threw the whole thing. I didn't do anything. I just threw it in there. And I mean, they're all over it. So then you can, you know, supplement this bedding feeding with vegetables and stuff that's really high nitrogen levels. That way you don't have to worry about the stuff going anaerobic and stuff. But you could just feed them this food, you know, this bedding. They'd actually do just fine, especially with the horse manure. That's it for today. I'll try and do an update a little bit on these feedings here in a couple weeks. And I am going to put another video out. I got a pretty neat project that I'm doing in my greenhouse. I actually have a worm bin inside my greenhouse. It's kind of like a wedge system in a sense, but it's actually built on the ground. And on one end I have the worm bin, which is a wedge system that's coming across, and the rest of the system, it's 8 foot long, so about 6 foot of the system right now is just compost. I threw a bunch of grass clippings and different things in, and it's producing a bunch of heat, and it's helping me heat my greenhouse for free. It's normally running about 130 degrees inside that compost side, and I do have to turn it about every 3 weeks a little bit. It's a little bit of a pain, but it isn't that bad. And then as a bonus, on the outside I actually have a huge compost bin. It's 4 foot by 8 foot by about 3 foot, and it's completely full of, I layered it with horse manure, and it is producing about, well, it's staying at about 140 degrees now for the last week and a half. I mean, it is hot. It is cooking. And it's horse manure, grass clippings, and stuff like that. And I have tubes inside there that run into my greenhouse. So I'm going to do a couple of videos on that. I mean, my greenhouse right now is staying constantly. When it's down, it was down to 25 the other day, and my greenhouse stayed at about 49, almost 50 at night, and it was 29 out there. So it's staying well over 20 degrees warmer. And that's the only heat. It's all coming from that compost. So something to look forward to. I'll post that hopefully in a couple weeks. I get some time to put those videos together. So that's all, folks. Until next time, this is Tom with VermiBag. Ciao.